Our topic of the day is real estate wholesaling. All right, so you're watching the Jackie Jackson Show, and today we're going to be talking about real estate wholesaling, which is a acquisition strategy for buying real estate or transferring ownership in real estate. It's a technique that a lot of people use as investors to jump in to the real estate game, and they don't need a lot of credit. They don't need to use their credit, nor do they need to use any of their own funds, or even if they do have to invest some money, it's a very, very minimal, all right? So it's not a lot of money at all. So we're talking about real estate investing and building wealth using the wholesaling strategy. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. So what is real estate wholesaling? It's a buzzword. You hear a lot of people talking about it. You can Google it and you can see that there's a whole lot of information about wholesaling online already, but the information sometimes is it's like scattered, right? So you'll have a piece here and a piece there, but what you're looking for is like a holistic point of view regarding how to put this strategy together and actually make it successful for yourself. So that's what we are talking about and discussing today, which is real estate wholesaling. All right. So before we get started, I want to just tell you who I am. So Jackie Jackson, you all know me. Jackie Jackson, I'm a real estate investor, entrepreneur, and expert, and I'm also a coach sharing these strategies and these techniques with women who want to build wealth with real estate, right? So I come from a banking background. I was a VP branch manager for over 10 years, over a decade, selling other people's money, right? So that was my first introduction into finance and into the real estate game, is because I actually worked for a financial institution and I learned how to invest in real estate the traditional way, which is to borrow money from a bank, get a mortgage, get a loan, and then you go out and get pre-qualified, and then now you go shopping for a property. That's the only way I knew how to buy real estate, okay, or to acquire real estate. Really, I didn't really know any other technique other than that one strategy. Now, that is one strategy. I don't want to discredit it or discount it, but it's just not the only strategy. And today we're talking about wholesaling, all right? So you can find me or follow me if you have not already, or you can send me messages, emails. It's okay. I look forward to reading all of you guys' comments. You can find me at the Jackie Jackson. So that's THE Jackie Jackson. And you can find me on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Google Plus, you name it, I'm there. All right. You can find me on all of those places like there. So in 2015, I resigned from my full-time position. And like I said, I was a VP at that time. So I made it pretty far up the food chain, but I just was dissatisfied, to be honest with you. It wasn't really a passion of mine. And I found my passion in real estate. And I found that I was making more money on the side with real estate than I was in my full-time career. So I transitioned and I started my own real estate investing firm. And that's what I've been doing ever since. All right. So I'm full-time in it. I don't do anything else. A matter of fact, the one thing that I do is serve my country. All right. So I'm actually a captain in the United States Army as a reservist. And that's the one thing that I do outside of real estate. And that's because I feel compelled and really passionate about service-oriented industries, and the military just happens to be one of those industries that I serve, and I love my community. So that's all that I do. So besides being in the military part-time, my full-time endeavor is here in real estate. So that's what I do. That's where the credibility comes in. And before we get started, I also want to share with you that I'm not an attorney. So what you need to do whenever you start any business or whenever you do anything in real estate, I highly recommend that you speak with an attorney, okay? In every state, every single state across the United States, as a matter of fact, every country, it doesn't matter, state and country, but here in the United States, each state has their own laws and statutes regarding real estate transactions. So whatever state that you live in, I highly encourage you to look up and read your state's statutes, all right? So in the state of Florida, I know the state statutes. It's chapter 475, right? 475. That's the one that governs real estate transactions here in the state of Florida because that's where my business is located. So you guys want to make sure that you do the same thing and you read up on your state's laws, as well as consult a professional attorney if you have any questions about anything before you even jump into anything. Does that make sense? All right, just to make sure I put that disclaimer out there, because every state is state specific regarding their real estate laws. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is kind of defining exactly what wholesaling actually is. All right. So just like how you have Wikipedia, there's something called Investopedia. I found it online and I was like, whoa, I didn't even know that existed. So Investopedia, I think that's pretty cool. They have all these like terms, like finance terms, banking terms, and real estate terms. And I thought it was pretty cool. So I copied their definition of wholesaling. And basically, I'm just going to explain it in like layman terms. So a wholesaler is an individual, right, that negotiates a contractual price with a seller of a real property, okay? So they go into contract with a seller that is interested in selling their property to someone, all right? So when they have this contract and this agreement, if you will, between the wholesaler and the seller, that wholesaler then begins to market their interest in their contract to another buyer. And they assign their interest in the contract to an end buyer. All right. And that assignment is they offer it for a fee. They've done a service. They've negotiated with the seller for the best price. And then what they do is they offer that contract to a third party buyer, who then pays an assignment fee to acquire that contract and that interest in that contract, right? To buy that property from that seller. Okay, so that's how that goes. So wholesalers really don't buy any real estate at all. What they do is they negotiate a best price with the seller, and then they take that contract and then they actually market their interest in the contract to a buyer, who then that end buyer is the actual individual party entity, if you will, that's going to purchase the property from the seller. All right. So I wanted to be clear and make that distinction. All right. Because there's a lot of controversy surrounding wholesaling, and many people question it and wonder if it's legal or anything like that. So we'll go into that in a minute. So the difference between what the wholesaler sells their contract to their end buyer and the difference what they contracted with the actual seller, that is where the profit is. Okay. So if the seller says they accept an offer for $45,000, and then that wholesaler sells their interest in the contract for $50,000, there's a $5,000 spread. There's a difference in there. Then that is their compensation. That is their profit that they are going to be making. So wholesalers do not earn commission, all right, because most of them are unlicensed. So you don't have to be a licensed sales agent to be a wholesaler. But if you are a licensed sales agent and a real estate sales agent or broker or realtor, then all you have to do is disclose to the seller that you are a licensed professional in your state. And this is what your intent is that you are going to assign your interest in the contract to a third party buyer. All right. So that's how that works. All right. So I'm glad I explained that. So is wholesaling legal? Well, this is where the controversy comes in, right? So those argue, and I'm going to read it for you. There are many people that argue that real estate wholesaling is illegal, and they claim it to be illegal because the wholesaler is acting as a broker, all right, in the deal without being licensed. So they are not selling a property, but simply selling their ownership interest of a real estate contract. So that's what wholesalers do. So that is the reason why I highly recommended you to read your state's laws, because from state to state, there are some variations. And in the state of Florida, it is chapter 475, part 1 is what discusses what brokers mean, right? So what does it mean to actually broker real property? Okay. So I actually have that definition here. I copied it from the state statute. So controversy really is like who defends it, like the wholesalers, like people like me and other investors, thousands of investors across the country that defend wholesaling. What we're really saying is like, listen, we don't have to have a license to transfer our interest in the contract. If we were, buying the property or, presenting ourselves as a licensed professional in the real estate, then yes, that would make sense that we are doing something that is contrary to what our state statutes say. But there's nowhere in the state statutes, at least for the state of Florida, that it says that you can't transfer your interest in a contract for real estate to another party and end buyer. So that's where that, that line is in delineation, where you have to be very careful in understanding what your state laws are. So let's find out what the brokers are actually saying here. So this is the actual definition. So it's Florida State Statute 475.01, subchapter A. All right, hopefully I said that correct. My broker friends will correct me later on. So what does it really mean to broker? Okay, so it says that a broker is a person who, for another person, perhaps, right, and for compensation or value consideration directly or indirectly, paid or promised expressly or impliedly, or with an intent to collect or receive compensation of valuable consideration, therefore appraises, auctions, sells, exchanges, buys, rents, or offers, attempts, or agrees to appraise, auction, or negotiate the sale, exchange, purchase, or rental of business enterprises or business opportunities, or any real property. And it goes on and on and on and on. And it explains in more detail about real property. So if a wholesaler is not transferring any interest in real property and is only in the interest in that contract that they have as the buyer to that seller, then they're not transferring any real property. So that's where the controversy comes in. So I wanted to be clear and kind of define that so that you can understand the difference and be able to speak intelligently when you hear somebody talk about wholesaling, right? All right, cool. So now you get it? You got it? Good. Okay. So how much does a wholesaler really make? Like, how much do they make? What does, why is this so profitable? And why is it that some people do this and choose to learn this acquisition strategy? All right, so I'll tell you why. All right, so a wholesaler's profit may not be as big as like a person who has decided to be like a fix and flip. You watch HGTV and they buy your property and then they renovate the whole thing. They just tear everything out, right? And then they renovate the whole thing and then they put the property back on the market and list it with a realtor. And now they are waiting on a buyer to buy that property after it's like all dolled up. So a wholesaler doesn't do any of that, all right? So they don't take any of those types of risks. All they do is negotiate the lowest purchase price with the seller, and then they actually sell their ownership interest in that contract to an end buyer. And usually that end buyer is another investor who is intending to fix up that property. They're going to take on all the risk and spend all the money for the renovation. So they leave all the profit in there for that investor. So wholesalers really only make small margins, and those margins are usually anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 per assignment that they do for their contract. So they can do up to 2 to 3, sometimes 4 or 5 if they're very, very aggressive. And the really, really good wholesalers, they're doing like 5 to 10, up to 20 deals per month. I think that's fantastic. Now that's when, they make their business system a priority and they have their whole process already scheduled out, and maybe they have a whole team aligned and they are just killing the game. All right. But on average, wholesalers will make somewhere about $5,000 to $10,000 per deal. That's why it's so lucrative, because they're not fixing anything. They're not doing any of that, nor are they even buying a property. They're not doing anything. They're just connecting the dots, connecting the seller with an end buyer and selling their interest in the contract. And that's it. They're out of the game. They don't do anything else, right? So that's it. It's a great party. And then they just collect the difference after they introduce some people to some other people. And that's it. That's pretty cool. So that's pretty much what it is. So this is why investors are so attracted to wholesaling, because they really can generate a lot of wealth in a very short period of time by wholesaling having very little risk, all right? So here are the 7 steps to wholesaling successfully, all right? So the first one is, and this is how this strategy really works, and you can ask any wholesaler who is making this like their full-time business, or maybe they're doing it part-time. These steps are really, really simple, okay? So the first one that they do is a wholesaler investor markets to motivated sellers, right? They have to find sellers that are motivated enough to actually take their offer, right? Their really, really small offer, because they have to be very, very conservative in their offer, right? So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is that they negotiate for the lowest price with that seller, all right? Based on the condition of the property and the fair market value of the property at the time. The third step is that they go into contracts with that seller, and they have a formula called the maximum allowable offer, okay, or MAO formula. So MOA, maximum allowable offer. Oh, actually MAO. All right, so I got a typo in my presentation. I got to fix that. Never mind. But anyway, it's still the same thing. So step 4. A wholesale investor, they market their contract to their end buyer, all right? So they're going to assign their interest to that end buyer. Step 5, the wholesaler assigns their contract to that buyer. So they market, they find a buyer, then they assign their interest in that contract to their buyer. Fair enough? Got it? Still with me? Good. Number 7, the wholesaler profits from the difference between the seller's contract price and the buyer's contract price. Too easy, right? I think so. All right. So let's get this math straight, all right? So I used an example of $100,000 because most people can kind of like wrap their head around 100,000. It's a nice, easy number. Everybody can figure it out on a calculator, all right? So the maximum allowable offer is based off of a few different variables that you can plug and play into this equation. So what we look for as investors is the after repair value for that property, right? What is that property going to be worth once it is all dolled up, HGTV style, it's all, pretty and renovated? What's that property going to be worth? So the way how we determine what that is we go into the marketplace and do our research, and we look for things called comps, comparables. So we look for information called comparables. And comparables are properties that have sold within the last 90 days, and they're kind of like I would probably say maybe up to a half a mile radius. Some people go out to like a 1 mile radius. I like to be a lot more conservative. I want to make sure that the comparable properties that I'm looking for, I'm comparing apples to apples, so that those properties are exactly in the same neighborhood as the property that, I'm trying to contract with that seller. And those properties are in like the same condition, or they're like all dolled up the way how I would expect that an end buyer would want them to look. So I would look for the same square footage, the bedrooms, bathrooms, stories, whether it's 1 story, 2 story. I'm looking for properties that are exactly the same, so that I can compare and see what those properties sold for in the last 90 days and are the closest to the property that I'm interested in contracting with that seller. All right. So that's how you determine your after repair value. So once I get the after repair value, I'm going to times it by a specific percentage. And I use 65%, which is very, very conservative. And in different markets, that percentage is going to vary contingent upon what your market's, demand is, right? So what your market can bear. So here in Central Florida, 65 to 70% is pretty normal. And then you are going to minus any repairs that are required for that property to bring it up to that HGTV, beautiful renovation style. So what would that look like? So that's $100,000 times 65%, which would equal $65,000. And then I'm making an assumption that property needs $20,000 in repair. So I am going to minus $20,000 from my $65,000. And now I get $45,000. That is my maximum allowable offer. I cannot go any higher than that. So therefore, whatever my first offer is that I negotiate with the seller, it really has to be less than that. It has to be less than that, all right? So the maximum allowable offer in this case is about $45,000, and that's the way that you're gonna build in your profit as a wholesaler by assigning your contract to someone else. The next step here, and I just wanted to give you just a quick example again in a different way so that you can actually see it. So I am wholesaler, and let's see, A is seller, B is wholesaler. All right, so that makes sense. So the A is the seller and the B is a wholesaler. All right, so A and B, they contract with each other and everything is great for $45,000. The wholesaler, B to C, is contracting or selling his contractual interest and ownership in that contract to their end buyer for $55,000. Yippee! So 55,000 minus 45,000 equals $10,000. That's dope, right? So the profit for the wholesaler in this instance would be on average about $10,000 plus or minus marketing costs and all that cool stuff that goes into actually putting a deal together. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's a pretty good payday, I think. All right. It's not that bad at all. All right. For, just connecting some dots. All right. So you would say, well, Jackie, why in the world would a seller of a property take $45,000 as a contract price when their property is worth up to $100,000? Right? That doesn't make sense to you. And I know it doesn't. It didn't make sense to me either when I first started out as well. Because I'm like, well, why wouldn't that seller sell the property for the $100,000 themselves and then they'll make all of the profit? Well, there's always these variables with motivated sellers that you have to keep in mind. If they were able to sell the property for $100,000, absolutely. I encourage people to do that as well. Because when I make my offers, if my offer is not accepted, the first thing I'm going to say to them is perhaps, you might want to renovate your property, infuse value into your property, and then now you can sell it for more. So that's definitely a logical answer and a great advice to any property owner. You can always sell your property yourself and maximize your own profit. But here's the challenge with selling properties, all right? In theory, it makes sense. But here's the real reality of it. Most people don't have the money to do the repairs to their property, right? So they may have some delayed maintenance or some financial issues that they don't have the $20,000, like I said, in the example that we had. So what they do is they'll sit there, they want to make $100,000, but they also don't have the $20,000 to bring the property value up to $100,000 after they do the repairs. Sometimes people are emotionally detached to a property and they just don't want it. Maybe they do have the money and they're like, I'm not going to use my money to fix this house. I'm just going to sell it as is, right? So that's one of it. That's one of the challenges and kind of, dispositions that a seller may have. And then another one is maybe they just want a quick sale. Whatever they get for it, that's it. They're cool with it. They just want to sell it, get rid of it, and they just don't want to be responsible for it at all. And when I say it, I'm talking about the house. And another situation may be where they have like a life-changing event, and that life-changing event may have caused them to, not be in a position to actually do the repairs for a property and to bring and infuse value in it. So they may have financial issues, health issues, or they just don't want the property at all, okay? The next thing is motivated sellers really want to just sell the property as is, okay? They are really just interested in just getting rid of that property, and that is their motivation. And there's all types of different types of motivations, and I'm going to share 21 different types of motivations with you so that you can actually see how motivated sellers, they're easy to find. Because that's normally the next question that I have is, well, Jackie, where do I find these people that will sell their properties for less than its value? Like, why would they do that? And who are they and where are they hiding, right? I need to talk to them and I need to do some wholesaling deals. Well, I'll show you where they are. Don't worry. So here it is. So we have 21 different types of motivated sellers. All right. So I compiled this list just based off of my personal experience and the people that I have spoken with over the years as being a professional real estate investor. So I know that the number one, you have landlords, people who have had property for a really long time. And they are tired of managing their property and evicting, tenants out of it. And they're like, you know what? I'm tired. I've already cash flowed this property. I'm ready to sell it. I'm ready to cash out and move on. All right. So that's one category. Another one is inherited properties, right? Heirs. So people pass away all the time and they leave property to their family, right? So you have people that inherit properties in like other states, other countries, and they're like, man, I don't want this house. This house has to be maintained and repaired, and I'm not moving here. I live someplace else. So they really don't want it. They just really want to, they want to sell it, right? So maybe somebody's in foreclosure, maybe they may be experiencing some kind of like financial distress, and they've missed a couple of payments, and they're like, you know what, I just need to sell so I can avoid foreclosure. So that's one motivation as well too. People need to relocate. They may need to relocate in a quick hurry. Maybe they got a really great job that's paying them more money, and they're like, look, this house right here is a hindrance to me, and I just really need to move really, really fast, and I don't have time to list my property with a sales agent or a realtor, and I just really need to sell it right away. I don't have time to, market and put the property on the MLS. I just really need to sell it. So unexpected job loss, that could be devastating. People lose their jobs all the time, and now they can't afford their house. All right. So here is a list. You can look at them, read them. There's 21 of them. Heirs, what's that? For sale by owner, expired listings, absentee owners, deferred maintenance. There's all kinds of cool things in here. So I just want you to see this list. I look and I see, I think heirs is here twice, but what that should be is probate, right? So probate is where you can actually file a filing of someone that passed away, and now their estate is being managed by a personal representative. Someone is managing that person's estate and looking to liquidate their assets, and sometimes there's real property in those assets in order to pay off their creditors and disperse those assets to their beneficiaries. So that's one of the things that I'll update on the slide, but this is a lot. All right. So if you can't find a motivated seller, then you can always come back and look at this list right here, because there's a lot of people on here in a lot of different categories that you can be successful with. So negotiating tips, right? So tips number 2, you got to understand the seller's why, right? And their why comes from understanding which category they fall into here, and basically just listening to their needs and trying to understand what it is that they want to accomplish with the sale of their property. So you understand the seller's why, and then you make your offer to them. It has to be extremely conservative. I mean, that's how the wholesalers are very successful. Their offer is always very, very conservative, and you explain and educate the seller why your offer is conservative, because you need to leave some profit in the deal for your end buyer, because they're the person that's going to be taking on all of that risk. And you have to be very, very firm and very patient, and always follow up with the seller, especially if they don't take your offer the first time. All right, the sale and success is normally in the follow-up. Just keep following up with them. All right. So what you also want to do is you have to actually go into contract. So once a seller says yes and you are successful, then you go into contract with them, and for that negotiated price, right? So you want to actually complete all the paperwork, the negotiated price. You request a title search, and that your title team or title company, escrow company will do that for you. And then you begin to market your ownership interest in that contract to potential buyers, and then follow up with the seller as time progresses and let them know that everything is okay. So you want to always be transparent, and you want to always be disclosing to the seller your intent, that you're assigning your interest to someone else. All right. And then you also want to market, step 4, market your deals to find buyers, right? So you're marketing and marketing to buyers, and you would market on social media, online classifieds. One of my favorite places would be real estate investor associations. Why? Because it's a group of investors. Like, why wouldn't you just go to one place that had everybody that you needed to talk to sitting right there, waiting for you to tell them exactly what it is that you have available for them? And then you can also call the We Buy Houses guys. They're always interested in acquiring new property and buying. And then you can also do your own marketing, which is yard signs, flyers, postcards to find your potential buyers. So you would find your potential buyer, and then step 5 is to contract with that buyer, right? So you're assigning your interest in your original contract, which is your A to B, and then your B to C is your assignment with your end buyer. So with your end buyer, what you would be doing here is the best practice is to have like a list of buyers available upfront so that you can actually close very quickly and make your seller very, very happy, right? So what you do, you want to provide your potential buyer with estimated repairs, whatever repairs the seller told you, and what you documented after you've assessed the property and see its condition. You want to provide the comparables, what you've learned about the neighborhood and what kind of sales, retail sales are happening in that neighborhood. You want to also provide a title report. Maybe you want to make sure that there aren't any liens or encumbrances on that property that you are unaware of. You want to make sure that you inform your potential buyer of anything like that, and any pictures of the property that you have acquired that the seller has allowed you to take, all right? And then you also want to collect a non-refundable deposit for your from your buyer, actually, and then have that deposit sent over to your title company, because that is where it's supposed to be held. It's going to be held in escrow on behalf of the contract, on behalf of the deal. So pretty much that's how you want to do step 5, all right? So step 6 is the closing. How cool is that? So the closing now, the buyer, your end buyer, they bring all of the resources, all of the cash to close on your deal, all right? So they bring the money for the purchase of A to B, and they bring your assignment fee, and they also pay the closing costs for the acquisition and the transferring of ownership of the real property, all right? So that's key. That is absolutely imperative. So your end buyer is the one that brings all of the cash resources to make the deal happen. All right. And when they do that, everything is happy. There's rainbows and there's so much wonderful things happening. The deal closes successfully. Everything is all good. And then the title company disperses the check to you. That's step 7, right? So step 7, you get a check for the difference, which is your assignment fee, and you collect pass go. Collect $100 pass go. That's my Monopoly correlation. And you're happy. You go on vacation. You do all kind of cool things. You take your kids out for dinner, or your wife, or your significant other, your husband, and you do your happy dance. And then you say, gee, I wonder how many times I could do this again. How can I repeat doing this successfully? So that's really how it is. Then you go back and you start from step 1. All right. So how cool is that? So I just wanted to share with you guys how to do the real estate wholesaling strategy in a nutshell in 7 steps. And Sherry Summers and I, on June 29th through July 1st, we'll be having a 3-day workshop and field trip. And we will be explaining more in detail the wholesaling strategy amongst other strategies for acquisition and building wealth with real estate. So you want to come out to that. To buy your tickets to that event, it is cashflowyourlife.com/3 days. And it's happening in Brevard County in Titusville. And it's a 3-day workshop. You really don't want to miss it. We're sharing some really insightful information about how to actually, build wealth in real estate, not only in creative real estate transactions, but also through property preservation. And that's what Sherry Summers is going to be sharing with everyone who's in attendance there. So I look forward to seeing you guys. We had our early bird special. It ended on June 15th, and it was $267. And we've decided, since so many people had a lot of interest, we decided to extend the early bird special, $267 for another couple of days. So it's still up on the website. Go ahead and buy your ticket. I promise you, you will not want to miss this information. All right. This is life-changing. And I went through it in a quick, fast hurry, but there's a lot more to it. And we are going to be sharing all of that information in great detail so that you could be as successful as possible. So that's real estate wholesaling in a nutshell. All right. Thank you so much for watching the Jackie Jackson Show. And I look forward to seeing you guys at the 3-day workshop, cashflowyourlife.com/3 days. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.